So today, I want to reflect, before we go into the Christmas pageant, I want to reflect on the Christmas story. And I want to reflect today on the hospitality of the Christmas story. Maybe you've never given it much thought. The hospitality of the Christmas story. Now, hospitality in America is nothing like hospitality in other countries. I've learned this firsthand. Addie and I were in Italy about 10 years ago. And we went to Italy just to see all the sights, but also to visit some of our family and our friends. Some of my family from Italy, because my grandparents were from Italy. And my dad got us in touch with relatives who lived just about an hour south of Rome. And we were to take a train from the Rome train station an hour south and meet them for dinner. That was kind of what the plan was. And we got into Rome late that night, and we were tired, and we had a Vatican tour at 8 a.m. the next morning, and I called my relative who lived an hour south of Rome, who I'd never met before. I called him on the phone in the train station in Rome, and I told him that we were going to have to cancel, that we just simply couldn't make it. But he insisted, and he persuaded us not to cancel, but to come. And so Addie and I went. And he picked us up at the train station there and proceeded to take us on a tour of all these sites around town, my grandfather's hometown. And he was shocked to hear that we were planning on going back to Rome that night. We were just thinking we were going to have dinner, right? Well, in their mind, we were going to stay for 3 days. So they were shocked and disappointed that we were just going to come in and have dinner and leave. They wanted us to stay, and so they showed us around, and they gave us like a 10-course Italian feast. I mean, it lasted forever, and well past midnight. We went to bed, and we got up the next morning, and we left. And they were so disappointed, and we were so American. On the move, we had an agenda, a plan. We didn't have time for some good old Italian hospitality. In fact, I don't think we truly know what hospitality is. As good as we think we are with hospitality here in America, I think other countries have us beat. One of the most remarkable places I've witnessed hospitality is in the Middle East. They know hospitality. Hospitality is a big deal in Palestine today, and it was 2,000 years ago when Jesus was born. There's a book out there by Kenneth Bailey, a Presbyterian minister who wrote Jesus Through Middle Eastern Eyes. Kenneth Bailey is a theologian, scholar, and lived in the Middle East, working in the church there in the seminaries for 60 years. And he opens our Western eyes to a great truth we have missed in the way that the Christmas story has been interpreted and seen from our Western eyes. That great truth revealed in the Christmas story is that of the hospitality shown to Joseph and Mary in Bethlehem, and the call for us to practice the same hospitality towards God and to others. This sermon may open your eyes to a new understanding of the Christmas story. Let's pretend like we're traveling to Palestine and learning from someone who sees things differently than our Western perspective and culture and customs. Let's take a tour of the Christmas story with a respectable tour guide, Kenneth Bailey, an ordained Presbyterian minister, a man who lived there for 60 years. Let's learn from his experience, his scholarship, and his perspective. Let's take a fresh look at Luke 2. It says that the Roman Emperor Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census be taken of the entire Roman world. Everyone had to go to his hometown to register. And so Joseph went up. He went up from Nazareth to Judea to Bethlehem, the town of David, because Joseph belonged to the house and the line of David. In Matthew chapter 1, we see that it tells of Joseph's lineage. Joseph was of the royal line of King David, and this was a big deal. So he went to Bethlehem to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. We all know the story, right? While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn son. In our Western mindsets, we always think that Mary and Joseph were in such a hurry. don't we? Because that's how we are. We're always in a hurry. We think they're in a hurry, rushing to Bethlehem, and we imagine Mary having contractions while riding on the donkey, which, by the way, there's no mention of a donkey in Luke 2. And then suddenly, the baby was born right as they got to Bethlehem in the dark of the night, right? Isn't that how we always think of the Christmas story? This probably isn't what happened. Joseph and Mary probably arrived with plenty of time before the baby was born. While they were there in Bethlehem, Joseph's hometown, that's where Jesus was born, not in haste, but with some forethought and preparation. The scriptures say that Mary wrapped Jesus in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no room for them at the inn. At least that's what the 1984 version of the NIV says. The more recent NIV translation says, because there was no guest room available for them. Guest room is a more accurate translation, not inn. The Greek word here is kataluma, which means a place to stay. It could mean some sort of inn-like business, a house, most likely a guest room. Houses in the Middle East, like many of ours in America, have a guest room, a room for family and friends, maybe strangers. Maybe you have a guest room you list on Airbnb. Kind of works like an inn, right? The first century Middle East did not have a plethora of hotels like Motel 6, Motel 8, Four Seasons, the Marriott. They did have commercial inns, and that's mentioned, a different Greek word for that. Pandoxion is mentioned in the parable of the Good Samaritan, where the Samaritan takes the man beat up to an inn, and there's an innkeeper. But that's not the word Luke uses here in the Christmas story. He uses kataluma. Kataluma is a different word. It means guest room. Wouldn't Luke have used the word pandoxion, not kataluma, if he was referring to a commercial inn for the Christmas story? You know, the guest rooms in first century Palestine were attached to people's homes, either built on top of the home, like the upper room was a kataluma, a guest room, or they were attached to the side of the house. Katalumas. It's also worth noting that even though many of our Christmas pageants, and I think even our Christmas pageant today, talk about an innkeeper, there's no such innkeeper mentioned in the Christmas story. Do you know what was mentioned? In Matthew 2, the Magi entered into the house where Mary and Joseph were staying. It says, when they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. I want you to imagine what a first century home in Bethlehem might have looked like. A typical village home was one room, and a small lamp could light the entire room. Remember how Jesus said, no one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bushel, but on a stand, and it gives light to the entire house. Because houses in those days were just a one-room house. It was a one-room house with a stable connected to it. The stable down below, either in a cave or down below the structure of that one-room house, but it was enclosed as part of the house. The mangers were feeding troughs that were cut out from the floor of the family room at the top of the stairs so animals could feed standing up at night. The manger was most likely a stone trough, very sturdy with hay in it. It would have been suitable for a baby. The family room of the house was where they lived, where they ate, where they slept, where they hung out. They kept their animals there with them in that enclosure. You know why? Because animals, they didn't have forced air heating back in the first century. Animals kept them warm. They also had problem with thieves. And so they had to keep their animals with them inside to protect them from thieves at night. It wasn't like a Wyoming or Iowa farm with a barn away from the house where the animals slept. No, the animals slept right there in that cave stable connected to the family room of the house. The other aspect of these first century homes is they had the kataluma, the guest room, either above or next to it. And this is where travelers stayed. So the Middle Eastern way of understanding the Christmas story, and perhaps a more accurate reading, is that the guest room was full, not the inn. The guest room was full, probably from other family members coming for the census. And so Mary and Joseph were invited into the main house. They were invited into the main house where the animals slept and where the manger was. And that's where they were. That's where Jesus was born. Not in some cold, isolated barn, but in the warm heart of the first century Middle Eastern home. Yes, in a manger, surrounded by animals, but also surrounded by family, wrapped in cloths, as was the custom and still is today. Because Joseph was of David's royal family from Bethlehem, we can be darn well sure they were welcome in by Joseph's family in Bethlehem with full Middle Eastern hospitality. Not only because Joseph was of David's royal line, but also because Mary was a young pregnant woman in need of care. And in every culture, a woman about to give birth is given special attention. In most communities around the world, if a woman is about to give birth, people come to her aid regardless of the circumstances. The same would have been true for the people of Bethlehem. Perhaps Joseph and Mary, although family, maybe even like strangers, because maybe they hadn't met these people yet, who knows? Kind of like Addie and I in Italy with my relatives in my grandfather's hometown, they were welcomed in with full hospitality, not just for a few hours, but for days. And in Joseph and Mary's case, probably not just for days, but for weeks, maybe even months. My friends, Jesus came in a very simple village home, an everyday home, nothing special or fancy, not a mansion, just normal, ordinary life. My friends, the Christmas story is a story of hospitality and welcome. A story of hospitality and welcome. The shepherds, too, were welcomed and shown hospitality around the manger. Despite our romantic Western view of shepherds tending their flocks, shepherds in the Middle East were considered a lowly position, dirty, stinky, uneducated, and social outcasts in society. Yet the angel came to them and welcomed them into the story of Christmas. And they too were unexpectedly welcomed into the house in Bethlehem with Mary and Joseph. And the angel said, "Do not be afraid, shepherds." And I wonder if one reason they said, "Do not be afraid," because this king isn't some king like King Herod or what you might imagine a king to be. This king is just like you. He's being born in a place very familiar to your life and common to you, in cloths, and lying in a manger in a common, poor, ordinary peasant home, just like yours. My friends, this is good news. This means that you and I are also welcomed in to the Christmas story. Even though we may be lowly or dirty or stinky with sin, God invites us into the story, like the shepherds, to see this wonderful thing that God has done. Our Savior, now in flesh appearing. As a little baby, God with us. Peace and goodwill to all. We are not strangers to God, but we are family. Will you love God by welcoming Jesus into your life? Will you be like Joseph's family in Bethlehem who welcomed Jesus into the very heart of their home and into their lives? Not just for an hour on Sunday, but for every day. Not just in the guest room or the stable, but in your family room. Is Jesus a stranger to you? Welcome him in. He's actually your brother, your Lord, your God. Welcome him into your life, into your heart, your mind, your soul, your decisions, your emotions, into your family, into your life plans, into your hopes and dreams. Welcome him with full hospitality. Treat him as your distinguished yet humble guest, and he will change your life. We're also called to love our neighbor by welcoming them into our lives? Will you welcome others into your life? Will you show others the hospitality and love of Christ? Treat them as family, because we need more of this in our world today. Kenneth Bailey ends, and I end today with this quote from him. Our Christmas nativity, our pageants, sets remain as they are, because ox and ass before him bow, for he is in the manger now. But the manger was in a warm and friendly home, not in a cold and lonely stable. Looking at the story in this light strips away layers of interpretive mythology that have built up around it. Jesus was born in a simple village home, just as the Middle East has known for at least 3,000 years. Yes, we must rewrite our Christmas plays, but in rewriting them, the story is enriched, not cheapened. So, my friends, as we enter into the Christmas pageant today, may this new understanding of the Christmas story encourage you to show hospitality, to welcome Jesus and others into the very heart of your home and your life. This is the good news of Christmas. As Eugene Peterson said, Jesus moved into the neighborhood. Actually, he wants to be born in your very own home.